Right now, Kendall, thanks for your time as always, and we'll lead off
Got
with
it.
this. Ole Miss got smoked by Tennessee this weekend. There's no other way to describe it. Which is true? Is Tennessee just that good? Is Ole Miss overrated, or is the truth somewhere in between those two?
I think it has more to do with Tennessee just being that good. I hate to say it, but it's kind of the team I warned you about a week ago on the show. I just think when you look at Tennessee overall, I think they're incredibly balanced. They remind me a lot of Arkansas last year in the sense that there's just not a weakness. You could argue their pitching's in better shape than Arkansas last year. You look at the rotation. Chase Burns, as I kind of warned. He's a cool customer. He's got elite stuff. I thought he was excellent in the series opener to kind of get things started, kind of set the foundation for the weekend for the Vols. And then you look at the job that Chase Dolander did. I thought that was his best start of the year. He's got elite stuff. He's gotten hit at times, but he was electric. And then when you look at Drew Beam and the job that he did in the series finale, that's kind of been what Tennessee's been all year. They're going to pound the baseball home or away. I know a lot of people talk about, well, Lindsey Nelson's an offensive park, and that's true. But they're hitting bombs everywhere. And so they're just a really balanced offensive team. And clearly, I mean, they're in a situation right now, Brian, where they're getting Blade Tidwell back this week. And Tony Vitello is saying that Blade Tidwell is probably going to be a reliever because he's not taking someone out of the rotation. So you're talking about a preseason first-team All-American that has been relegated to the bullpen when he returns because the rotation is doing so well. That's how you know things are going well for you.
How did they get to this point? I was thinking that over the weekend. It's just, I know they were a good team a year ago, but how was Tony Vitello able to take Tennessee, resurrect them from the dead, basically, and make them as good as they are today?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is Dave Serrano left him with some really good pieces. Tony deserves about 98% of what they've done. But to be able to even have a chance to do that, you've got to have players in the system. And Tennessee had players in the system. The problem is they're running. What was so funny is I kind of consider like Tennessee kind of that, like the feel of them is like old school Fullerton where they're just a little rough on the edges. What's funny is Dave Serrano went to Tennessee and basically tried to operate like a West Coast small ball, whereas like Tony Vitello took those players and kind of geared them more towards guerrilla ball and being ultra aggressive offensively. So I think their offensive style is very attractive to recruits. Tony is a relentless recruiter. He will wear you out in recruiting. He is not married, doesn't have kids. It is his livelihood, like 24/7. And so that's kind of an advantage compared to a lot of different coaches. And I think the other thing for me is a lot of it, depends on your assistants, right? You look at Josh Elander. Where did he come from? TCU, a program that's been to Omaha, that was, I think, went to Omaha 2 or 3 times during his playing career. Frank Anderson has been a head coach, was at Texas Tech under, Larry Hayes, was at Texas under Augie Garrido, has learned through, from some great coaches. So they just have great personnel. They recruited a high level. They've created this culture, this kind of rough around the edges mentality. And oh, by the way, they have some really good coaches. It's really kind of the perfect storm. Like they've got a perfect setup for what that school and what that program needs.
Kendall, when I look at Mississippi State, obviously getting the series win this weekend was very big for them. It just feels like this is going to be a grind this whole season for them, that 15-15, if they can get to that, they'd be doing pretty well. So that in mind, what do they have to do this weekend to get a win over Arkansas? Chris Lemonis has never beaten the Razorbacks.
Yeah, I think they'll get a win. I think Arkansas is different than we were last year. I know it's very strange to say considering the number 2 team in the country, but I think Arkansas is much more beatable than they were last year. They've got some guys, Brady Slavens, even Robert Moore. He's only hitting around 270. So they haven't been as explosive on the mound and offensively as they have been in the past. So I think there's an opportunity there. I think the biggest thing for Mississippi State is they have to continue to obviously come in the clutch. But, Preston Johnson, I thought, put together a pretty solid start last week, 3 runs in 6 innings. And, I think the Alabama series told me a little something about this team. Obviously, I think we learned a little bit from this club on Sunday at Georgia. But I think the fact they were able to come back in the 9th inning at home down in 2 games and the final game had an opportunity as well says a lot about the mentality of this club because they've been through a lot. It is not easy being the defending national champion. You're getting everybody's best shot. You've gotten off to a slow start. I mean, it is easy for everything to spiral out of control, and this team is not allowing that to happen. And so, I'm definitely not all out on Mississippi State. I think there's an opportunity here. I think when you look at Cade Smith, Preston Johnson, I think there's definite upside with those two guys. But, we'll see what happens this weekend. Mississippi State, I wish I could sit here and tell you, like, I know exactly what this team is. But I'll be honest with you, I don't know what this team is at all, and we're in week 7.
Now, you're not alone in that. Is this the most wide open you can remember the SEC West? It really feels like everybody could beat everybody in this division.
It really is wide open. I think you look at this division as a whole. LSU played great in 2 games at Florida. They also played awful against A&M 2 weeks ago. So are they more the team that we saw the last 2 days at Florida, or are they the team we saw in the first game at Florida and against A&M? We'll find out soon. They're obviously going to be very offensive. I still have major question marks about LSU on the mound. I think Arkansas and Ole Miss are 2 teams I still feel pretty good about. I think when you look at Arkansas and Ole Miss, Arkansas to me is more balanced. The thing about Ole Miss here moving forward, guys, is I'm concerned about John Gaddis as like a frontline guy in the SEC. I think he's a solid arm. He's certainly a lefty that can throw multiple pitches for strikes. But he kind of reminds me of like a lighter Jared Poche at LSU. If you remember him, like Jared Poche didn't have overwhelming stuff, but he was a lefty that could throw 4 pitches. And he had a really solid career at LSU. And I think John's kind of a step down from what he was. So, if they can just have him be who Jared Poche was at LSU, that's a win. I think the guy for me, though, fellas, moving ahead, and it's kind of like a broken record at this point, but like Derek Diamond, I get that he's gone through some injury things in the offseason and things like that, but he's got electric stuff. He just has to be able to hold it to be more consistent. So I think if you're Mike Bianco, 2 things. 1, you found out over the weekend your pitching staff's got a lot of work to do. 2, Tennessee's beating the heck out of everybody. And, you just look at the upcoming weekend as kind of a clean slate.
The biggest series, for Mississippi this weekend is down there in Hattiesburg with Louisiana Tech coming in. This is probably going to be, it's a little early to say, but a Conference USA decider, maybe even a host site decider. Are you excited about this series down there?
I love this series. I think when you look at, La Tech coming into the season was a club that we actually – Southern Miss in the same boat. Both those teams we actually hated to leave out of our top 25 coming into the season. I think when you look at, La Tech with the return of, Taylor Young, you look at the rotation with 3 veterans and Jonathan Fincher and Jarrett Wharf and guys like that and Ryan Jennings – there was a lot of upside with this team. I think on the same token, you look at Southern Miss, Christian Ostrander, once again, continues to do a phenomenal job with their pitching. It's really interesting over the last few years how Southern Miss has kind of gravitated toward this idea of like offensive baseball to a team that has some balance, but for the most part, like their pitching staff's the most impressive part of this team. So, I think when you look at USM, I think they're built very well for a regional. I think this is going to be a great series. I'm just taking 2 guys to keep an eye on this weekend would be Christopher Sargent, who's our player of the week this week, after having 5 home runs and 15 RBIs last week. And also Slade Wilkes. Slade Wilkes is one of those guys that if you're Scott Berry, he had offers from State, Ole Miss out of high school, chose to go to Southern Miss. And he's one of those guys, like if you're going to get a kid over those 2 schools, like he needs to pan out. And until this past week, he really hasn't been that guy. But all of a sudden, Slade Wilkes is starting to figure it out. And so the middle of that lineup is starting to look a little bit different for the Golden Eagles. I'm really excited about this USM team right now.
Looking around the SEC, obviously the big series is going to be Tennessee and Vanderbilt. That's going to be one. Vandy losing that series last weekend to South Carolina was very surprising to me. Tennessee, we all know what they are. Is Vanderbilt going to be able to get back on track, or do you think Tennessee keeps rolling?
I think this is a really interesting series, and frankly, for Tennessee, I think it's cool. It's a cool thing if you're Tony Vitello to, the week after beating up on Ole Miss, getting another tough team, because I think it would be easy for them if they played Ole Miss on the road, won big. Let's just say they play like Missouri. It kind of be easy to kind of get off track a little bit. But what happens when you're playing Vandy? Like your focus is, you have laser focus. And so I think this is actually big for Tennessee. And once again, I think I like Tennessee in this series. I think when you look at Vanderbilt, Carter Holton, the talented freshman, is coming off a rough starting at South Carolina. He has to go against Tennessee's offense. That's going to be a very tough chore for him. They need guys like Chris McElvain to really step up this weekend. I like Tennessee. But it's a rivalry series. You guys know as well as anybody. In a rivalry series, you have no idea how it might go.